Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Filler Feed podcast. I believe this is episode 5. I am not actually sure how long this podcast will be because I only have like a couple of things I want to talk about today because really this week there was almost nothing in terms of gaming news. It was pretty pathetic.
Yep.
So very little newsworthy to talk about, but I did find a couple of things that I actually found fascinating. So this is going to be one of those podcasts where we're going deep. We're talking about drugs and religion and fun stuff like that. But as always, today I'm joined by my good friend Eric. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Cool. Thank you.
Um, so let's talk about. I actually want to talk about marijuana first because I feel like that is most relevant. Um, So I stumbled upon, not really stumbled upon, it was actually on, I believe, the front page of Reddit. It was an Ask Reddit thread, and essentially what this thread was people were at, or I'm sorry, it was r Ask Historians. So somebody asked why, like, what made, or who rather, made cannabis or marijuana illegal in the United States. And essentially, this guy actually had wrote a paper on it. He had some sources to back it up. On essentially, he pinpointed it to one person in the 1920s and 1930s that had made cannabis illegal. And I actually want to read this entire passage, if that's cool with you.
Oh, dude.
Okay, so this is going. So just settle in. This is going to be about like a 7 minute read, I would guess. Okay, so this is by you, Roggen Raffle, and I'll probably, if I remember, I'll link this comment in the description of this video just so you guys can check this out because I think this is interesting. So he says, well, you can't really, okay, well, you can't really pinpoint to one single reason, but if you'd want to make it easy, the answers would most likely come to racism and Harry Anslinger. The first regulations of cannabis occurred with the Second Opium Convention in 1925, when cannabis trade, due to pressure from various sides, mainly Egypt, was set to be regulated like cocaine and heroin. The opium conventions were started to regulate the opium problems that had been rampant during the late 19th and early 20th century, but since Egypt was an important trade route to get opium to Europe, they weren't really too happy with opium being prohibited and strongly regulated. At the Second Opium Convention, they then put pressure on the other states, threatening the German Empire with an import embargo on cocaine and heroin, which at the time was produced by German pharma companies Merck and Bayer, respectively.
So
So
can I
this
add
was
something?
so
So I don't know if most people know this, but heroin was originally a prescription drug um, for pain relief. It
in the
was
United
basically
States
no, like in Europe.
or
I'm pretty
just
sure.
okay.
Um, let's look it up. But basically, like it was not originally like this really bad drug that like everyone is like, oh, this is hell. It was um, a prescription drug for pain relief, and that's exactly what it does. But it's also like extremely horrible for you and addictive. And then they found that out like eventually. So I think that's what the whole thing about the German pharma companies is talking about. So
And I remember something, I believe it was actually from when we took physics. We had an article that we read where they were talking about the chemical properties of heroin, and like it was actually found when they were, I believe that when they were experimenting with morphine or something. Like the reason why it's called
yep,
heroin is because it's like a hero drug. Like you
yep.
are I mean, it's so much of a painkiller, and but to counterbalance that, it's extremely addictive as well. And I don't believe they were at least scientifically advanced to realize that.
Yeah, it
Or
just took
not.
a while for them to realize, oh, people are not stopping.
Yeah,
This is getting pretty out of hand.
yeah. When if somebody is facing withdrawal symptoms and you don't know why, it must. I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyway, so on with the passage here. So, this was the global situation coming to the U.S. now. We have to see that after Prohibition of alcohol failed tremendously and was lifted in 1933. There were still puritanical movements in the US, and they needed a new scapegoat drug to be appeased. Also, a lot of people who worked to keep prohibition running were facing unemployment, so the US government founded the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is the predecessor of the DEA, and Harry J. Anslinger was appointed as the first commissioner of that agency. Anslinger was eager on promoting the prosecution of cannabis users because he felt that would give the agency more significance and had the side effect of mainly affecting young male blacks and Hispanics, who during that time were the main cannabis consumers, and Anslinger himself was a pretty big racist, so he could kill two birds with one stone. Anslinger started an incredible anti-cannabis propaganda movement depicting it as a drug that makes you violent, insane, murderous, criminal, and making white women have relations with unfavorable people, those to which he referred to as non-whites. To quote Anslinger, quote, "There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. It is a drug that causes insanity, criminality, and death. The most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind," end quote. Let me stop there. That is so ridiculous, and there is no scientific evidence to back that insane statement. Like, this is the ravings of who I would classify as almost like a madman, just because at the time, like, this guy is so biased in how he is talking here. Like, not only is he racist, and, you know, I want to also question his use of the word entertainers here. Like, what exactly is like the negative connotation behind an entertainer? Like, oh, entertainers use marijuana. Like, like people just, you know, people who just sing? Like, I don't know
Yeah,
who
like
exactly
there's
he's meaning here.
satanic music, jazz, and swing,
Yeah.
which, might I add, are very popular music styles at the moment, and were at the time.
Jazz
Like,
makes me want to kill people, clearly, I guess. I don't even know.
no, marijuana makes you want to make jazz and then kill people.
No, but like, okay, say the jazz must like if jazz is a satanic music,
Okay, I see what
then
you-
I
yeah, I
think,
see
you
what you're
know, people it's so
Such a dumb
that
point.
is so ridiculous. I just don't even know how to formulate a response. But okay, so along with his fear-mongering speeches, there were billboards put up, radio commercials, etc. What Anslinger also did was separating hemp from marijuana. He adopted the name marijuana, as the drug was called by Hispanics who used it, to describe the killer drug, if you can see my air quotes, cannabis, while hemp was still a steady fixture in U.S. economy and its production was promoted, especially once the U.S. joined World War II. People lost the connection that the two names are basically describing the very same thing, but it was an interesting scheme to avoid inconvenient questions. In 1937, Anslinger testified in Congress that marijuana is even worse than opium and told some made-up stories about poor white women who were abducted by Negroes and when they returned were pregnant or had syphilis. That is ridiculous. Okay. Or about a worker who smoked a marijuana cigarette and turned to raping his 6-year-old son. So the Marijuana Tax Act went into effect. This is usually where it comes up that the law was only instated because of DuPont and William Randolph Hearst, who feared their paper market would slip into the hemp sector. However, the actual evidence for that isn't that strong, mainly because compared to wood, hemp isn't really as great for paper production as some might think. Also, we shouldn't forget that until 1937, there have been at least 3 to 4 years of extraordinary anti-cannabis propaganda, and that surely left an impact on society. Not everyone, though, because in 1938, the work on the LaGuardia Report, which is the New York Academy of Medicine commission appointed by New York Mayor LaGuardia, started, and the commission published their findings in 1944 and basically contradicted the whole propaganda Anslinger had spewed. They found out, amongst other things, that marijuana did not form an addiction in the medical sense, was not popular amongst children and teenagers, and also did not lead to using stronger drugs like opium or cocaine, and that generally the whole concern about the catastrophic effects of marijuana is pretty much unfounded. Anslinger reacted by calling the report unscientific and prohibiting the doctors who worked on it to do any more research on cannabis and interfering in any research that would lead to an outcome unfavorable to the government/Anslinger's point of view. Later, Anslinger moved to the newly founded UN Drug Commission and spread the same propaganda, but now on a global level, leading to the UN's single convention on narcotic drugs, making cannabis a Schedule 1 drug with the same harm/effects as heroin, morphine, and cocaine. But this might lead too far now. So, essentially, this is how ridiculous the history of the illegalization of marijuana is. It was essentially brought about by a racist, ignorant white man who made it illegal for reasons including those, but also to advance his political agenda. In that he wanted to make this new organization basically the precursor to the DEA. He wanted to make that more important and to make it actually like essentially to justify its existence. Then he, after reports came out that essentially said marijuana is not that bad of a drug, he then silenced those doctors that were working on it. And then, unfortunately, he moved on to the United Nations, where he was able to then spread this viewpoint worldwide. That is so pathetic, and I believe, like, I don't know. It's caused irreparable damage. Like just the misinformation alone is is astounding when it comes to the I don't know, just the whole marijuana thing.
I totally agree. So that is kind of the reason that this is so slow is because like I honestly, even though this guy did a lot to push against marijuana and all that other stuff, I am surprised that it has taken like 80 years for this to start.
Yeah,
Like,
that is
just
a good
start
point as well.
pushing. Like that, like I get that, it was feared and we didn't know a lot about it. We didn't have the science for it. And I think that's part of the reason why, it took so long is because he silenced the science for it. He like that there has been like I can't imagine how extremely difficult it is to get research done on these kind of drugs because people just don't want to hear it. And like they just like it's either illegal, like I'm sure you can't get verification for this, or it's just super difficult to get people to listen to you, even if it's scientifically proven. So I think that like it's just this weird stigma that came up for no good reason. And honestly, like I've done a lot of research on many drugs, and I'm kind of at the point where like the Netherlands, right? Aren't they? They have like pretty much every drug legal. Like I don't know if it's sold like or taxed or whatever, but like I'm pretty sure you could just go get cocaine and I don't know this for sure. I'm just spewing what I think might be true. I know they have cannabis legal. I know they have at least that. So, point being, I think we should move towards that kind of state where it's not necessarily like we don't need to necessarily control this. And I think a lot of people would disagree with me because heroin and cocaine and all these other drugs are really horrible. And that, I get it. But also, I don't know if it's, like, this is kind of my point of view. I don't know if it's our government's decision, like, as far as a morality standpoint. I don't know if it's morally their decision to make about people's use of drugs. Like, I think it's hard to bring my point across because, like, cocaine and heroin and like meth are so horrible and cause people to just be rampant and kill people and steal and all this other stuff. But like I don't know, I feel like the killing and the stealing and all that stuff should be illegal and not the drug. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the reason why it's controlled, which I think anything that has been anything that's been proven to be beyond either like a certain addiction point or a certain like danger level should be regulated, because if you don't regulate it, then you get something like you know you want to keep it away from younger people is, I guess, my point, because
Okay.
if you if substances like that get into the hands of basically people who don't know any better and they become addicted to it,
Yeah.
well, that's that's a really unfortunate circumstance, and I think you would have to have some sort of regulation in place to basically keep that very addictive stuff just away from people who don't know any better.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and I totally get it. Like think of the kids. That's a great point. Um, but like honestly, I bet I could call someone up and get cocaine right now. Like even though it's illegal, and this is like weird for me to even say. But like even though it's illegal, I could totally just go get some. Like it's still prevalent and it's hard. I know it's like it's that's still not a good point. But like I don't know.
It's yeah, I'm like the argument that it is easily available doesn't
Mm,
justify its legalization, I think.
yeah, but I
But
think it could be well like regulated better if it were regulated by the government, right? Like it's regulated right now just like okay, this is bad, this is illegal. But like I feel like if it were regulated as far as like distribution, that I feel like well, now again, I don't know where I'm going with this because I don't know where I stand on this topic. It's kind of difficult and um I'm not educated enough to make really like that big of a decision. Honestly, I think cannabis, psilocybin mushrooms, and LSD should be legal, but that's just my opinion. Because
yeah,
I've done research on those, and those don't have like any really detrimental effects to your health. Um, although I think acid might have some weird shit with your brain.
I would agree.
Uh,
And so in like Colorado, for example, you know, legal age is another thing that's interesting too because
mm,
um, I think in Colorado they chose the age of 21 because not only like the reason why alcohol is illegal until you're 21 is because your brain is still developing, maturing. I
but
understand that
it's
as
still
well.
developing and maturing until like 29. I thought that was the A or 26. It's later in your 20s.
I guess I'm not educated on that, so I'll
But
just well, anyway.
point being, yeah,
Um, I think it should be like 19 though, because I think the thing is you should keep it out of high school, and beyond that, I think once you're 18, like you are a legal adult and you should
yeah,
be able I'm talking marijuana, by the way. Not alcohol is a little bit different because I feel like alcohol is much more dangerous than marijuana actually. And there
yeah.
has been data to back that statement up.
Mhm.
Alcohol is way more dangerous.
But like obviously, dangerous in what sense? Like because you can look at like as far as how far
Behavior
gone you are.
changes and
Yeah. So
driving under
like
the influence.
that's what I'm saying. So you could be totally like ripped out of your mind on marijuana, and you would be terrible behind the wheel. I mean, it goes both ways. But I think I think the reason that um, alcohol is so detrimental as far as accidents go is because first of all, it's very popular. It's widely accepted by our culture. Second of all, I think it gets you intoxicated faster. And well, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like I know alcohol um, like affects your motor skills and stuff like that
And I think
versus
it's
cannabis.
about it affects your decision making as well.
It's true.
I mean,
It's so hard for me to like come up with like I don't know where I stand on a lot of this. You know what I mean?
yeah, and it's just like I mean, the main point where I brought up this whole thing in the first place was like this, you know, the original reasons behind the illegalization of marijuana
It was racism.
are so ridiculous
Yep.
that like people who are fighting tooth and nail to keep it illegal, I think their basis for their arguments as time goes on, it just keeps crumbling and crumbling. And
I Have
yeah.
you heard of Nancy Grace?
She sounds familiar. I couldn't place
Okay.
any significance behind the name.
So we actually just watched a couple of Nancy Grace videos the other day. So um, she had basically she has her own TV show where she argues with people, and it's literally the most one-sided argument I've ever heard. She brings people on that she thinks won't make a good point. They make a good point. She just throws them under the bus. Like
Okay.
literally, it's the worst thing you will ever see, and you are so pissed off by the end of this video. You're like, how can someone be so ignorant? And I'm sure that she, she might not believe what she's spouting. Maybe she does, but she might not be as ridiculous as she seems on TV. But they make it ridiculous, and it's like it's obviously so scripted and just ridiculous. So at one point, one of the guys says, I don't remember what he said. He just made this really good argument, right? For like people in their own homes, sitting watching TV, eating Cheetos are not going to be a detriment to our society. And she goes, "You're obviously high." She said that to one of the interviewers. She said that, and I was like, "What? Like, where did
That
that come
is,
from?"
you know, that is, there should be people like judges who are like, that is actually like a straw man fallacy. They'll just like
Yeah,
point out different fallacies and stuff like that.
literally, like
Or that's actually ad hominem. But anyway, continue.
she would like bring up like stuff from their past that like had no relevance to the
That's
topic. She'd be
ad
like, "Oh yeah,
hominem
well
through
you
and through.
said this one time back in 2009 about this." And it's like, "Are you kidding me? You're a piece of trash." She also had two chains on her show. And you might think Two Chainz is a rapper, he's a douche, he's stupid. That's actually not true. He got like a 4.0 or something like that in high school, and he was like doing, he's like a successful person, obviously, and all this other stuff. Um, and he literally destroyed her on the air, and it
Wow,
was really funny. Like
that's
she just,
awesome.
I mean, she never admits it, but like a rapper destroyed Nancy Grace in a pod argument, and I
Is
was just like,
she
that's
is she by chance a part of Fox News,
no, but you
or
might think
is
she
it
is. I'm pretty
completely
sure she's
separate?
part of CNN. I don't. HLN is what she's a part of, I guess.
She's actually
HLN TV.
she's a former prosecutor, which is interesting because
That
she
is
probably
interesting.
it says her religion is Christian in Wikipedia. That has significance on her as a person, which is interesting. But
Basically, like, I want you maybe not now, but after watch one of those videos and just like I
just
want to
watch
see
it and get fired up.
yeah, just you do like you will literally get like sincerely pissed off because it's like she makes no good points, and um, it's just ridiculous. Like she would bring up like, oh well, how can you have like someone giving their child like look at this video of a person giving their child marijuana, and it's like first of all that person's very irresponsible. That's
Right.
like just ridiculous. Second of all, that is like 0.01% of the population that uses marijuana. Like
Not
that is
even.
like yeah,
Dude,
just
that's
a tiny amount. That's like two dudes that are douchebags that are their kids.
within the
Like that's
entire world.
oh, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like um Two Chainz was like, how can you like label an entire group of people based on these like two stories? And she's like, well, how can you think that like full access to this is going to be helpful? And he's like, well, you can art like I literally everyone has full access right now. Like you could go and get drugs and give them to your kid and be a douchebag right now without it being legalized. We might as well regulate it and get some money off of it and be smart about it. And it's just like, it was ridiculous. It was just
That
ridiculous.
sounds infuriating. I feel like I would become angry very quickly with this show. Is
Ugh,
it
it's
like
just,
okay, anyway.
yeah.
Um so yeah, I think I don't know, we probably talked enough about that. We're 25 minutes in already, believe it or not.
Um,
Um but okay, so this other thing I want to talk about, and this is some, as you said, this is some psychedelic shit. And I'm going to try to talk about this in like I don't want to sound like that like whoa dude kind of
Yeah.
person, you know?
Mhm.
Like I think this is actually really interesting in how brain chemistry actually works.
I'm gonna
Um
go. See, here's the thing. I'm gonna go the opposite route. You are like, I'm not gonna be like, whoa, dude, but like, I think you are gonna take more of a scientific standpoint on this. Am I right?
well, it's just
Like,
like
just kind of a
experience from my own perspective, I
okay.
guess.
I am more interested in like the spiritual side. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Um,
and that's like there are sects, not SEX, but
yep,
like
yep,
SEC.
yep.
There are sects of people who actually like examine philosophical like perspectives through the use of drugs, which is interesting in itself to me. But
Hmm.
um
So continue.
okay, so this guy this was an Ask Reddit thread, and this guy was asking so the original question was ex-atheists of Reddit, what caused you to switch, essentially. Excuse me. And this guy basically was talking about how the top comment was that this guy took some LSD and essentially he like saw things from a much clearer perspective. And you can take that with a grain of salt, whatever, however you believe LSD affects you. But this guy says, like in reply to that comment, he says some drug-induced experiences end up being more real than reality itself. The precision of your thoughts is like the clearest water. A gateway cracks open, and you realize you're finally seeing behind the curtain. The gnosis of this is unshakable, no matter how many times you try to rationalize out of it once you're sober. Your new knowledge you bring forth from certain drug experiences has a way of shattering your entire frame of reference. For now, you stand on a new foundation. And really, like, the meaning behind this that I took away is that, like, it's interesting how your brain has this certain balance of chemicals going on at like all times, and your brain just out of evolutionary like process has come to explain things in a very efficient way. And what I thought is that, like, in your sober frame of mind, like, are you missing out on something? Are you, like, your brain is going to rationalize something when in reality it might be something completely different than what you
Yep,
think.
exactly.
And it's like people were saying, like, drugs, whatever, drugs, LSD, illegal or legal, I don't really care. But what I'm saying is that once you upset that balance of chemicals in your brain through the use of drugs and you have this new perspective, I find that fascinating how you can like your thoughts might be even clearer if that was ever a thing. Like that kind of just blew my mind how people on drugs can have even more focused thoughts.
Yep.
Like what if you have this way to focus your brain, and there are like movies and like media behind this concept, but like if you could actually focus and cloud out distractions, you
That's
know.
literally the basis of meditation. Like that like it's a little different than what you're talking about, but that's like why meditation is so like extremely important in some people's lives is because it's a moment to just clear your mind. And it's like you're talking a little bit more about new perspectives, but it's kind of around the same like wavelength.
Yeah,
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I suppose like to me meditation is different because like you can make the argument that you're changing your brain chemistry in a way, like but not nearly on the level that something like drugs would
Yeah.
like physically affect you. And I guess
Yeah, well,
I
I
would
don't
be
know the
more
science
talking
behind
about
that.
what?
I don't know the science behind that, but
Neither do I. But I'm just
so
spitballing because
yeah.
I can, you know?
Yeah,
So,
that's and that I've struck like just even the thought like is it real? When you take drugs, like if someone were to take drugs, is that a real like I'm trying to like be real to myself. That's kind of the perspective I'm going with. And is that really me? Is that really my thoughts or is that the drug talking? You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah.
kind of a weird um like phenomenon. I'm not saying I'm taking drugs, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just like
So
I don't know.
it's more just a question of examining what is real versus how our brains perceive things, because I feel
Yep.
like I am this bundle of atoms that really has no significance. I just happen to be in this formation, me as a human, that allows me to have these conscious thoughts. But I feel like at some point, are you almost limited by your brain capacity? Like,
That
is there higher levels of thoughts that we are capable of? And like that to me is really, really interesting.
And I think that just progresses throughout your life. I think there are obviously higher level thinking. I think right now we are having higher level thoughts than a lot of people in our grade. Not to bash the rest of our grade or bash the rest of the people that are our age, but I think this is a level of thinking that not a lot of people get to um, at this age. And I think that just progresses throughout your whole life. Is that eventually we're just going to get to this point where we've reached the maximum amount of like thinking that we can in our lifetime, and then we're just gonna die. Like,
Yes.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's once we're dead, that's literally the maximum we can go because it just keeps going. It's an infinite amount of knowledge, and that fascinates me too. And that's something that I live for is just to progressively um, broaden my frame of mind and
Right.
to um, like I talk a lot about open-mindedness and just like the fact that you can learn so much from someone else is just fascinating. Like they have different thoughts and that has led them over their 18 years of life, just at our age, to think differently than we do and to come up with different ideas and to come up with either better or worse ideas or just in general different. And
Yeah.
that's something that like I think that we can gain a lot from is just each other's different perspectives.
Yeah, I
So
mean, your perspective is the sum of all of your past experiences combined to produce who you are today. And
we've talked about that a
yeah,
little
and
bit.
yeah, we have where essentially like the way somebody thinks. This was, I guess, the discussion is that the way that somebody thinks is like solely a product of their past experiences, to where like people almost can't help how they think just
Mhm.
because of their experiences, which to me is even more interesting. But I
Yep.
think, I guess I never brought this up in the past, but this is something that I just thought of now, that people can't help the way they think. I would say yes and no, because like in theory you don't have control over your experiences, but you kind of do. And I think like the way that you're programmed to react is based somewhat on genetics. And you could make the argument, well, okay, you're given the set of genetics, you don't have any choice over that. But that's where I think you're going to see a lot of the variability is just through how people are wired that way.
Yep. And that was the argument is that there's no such thing as free will, and is that based on both um, your biological predisposition and your environment, you will eventually lead yourself to make certain decisions, not because you're making that decision consciously, even though you are, not because you're doing that just making the decision, but because all of these things in your past life has led you to make that decision. And um, that's such a crazy argument, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. But it's just really interesting. Like, what if we're literally just machines that take in all this information and then spout out something
Yeah.
based on what the information was? Like,
Like
it's just literally insane. Just the
essentially
thought of it.
you're like you as a person is just this machine of taking an input and spitting out an output.
Hmm.
That's a vast oversimplification,
Yeah.
but like what if you can boil it down to that much,
And
which
I think the thought of that is scary for people. I think like the fact
because
that
it
because
takes away
we
their significance.
exactly. It takes away the complexity of human beings, right? We think of like, we can create this machine that has artificial intelligence. We created what's his name that can play Jeopardy. You know what I mean? Like that's something that we can do that's at a lower level than us, right? We are spiritually, quote unquote, higher than them, and that might not be the case if this is the fact, right? If this is what defines us as a human being, is we're not really spiritual beings, we're just machines,
Made out of
biological
just different
machines.
material.
Yep.
Biological material versus,
And
well, I
obviously
mean,
we're vastly
biological
more
material,
complex.
you can even make the argument like, okay, we're made out of biological material. That machine over there is made out of wood and or not wood, like metal, stainless steel, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it, circuits and wires. But really, it's all material that has come from this particular planet.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
you're
getting
really
even
just
deeper.
measuring things. Yeah, you're really just measuring things on the level of how complicated they are because the
Hmm.
brain is a piece of like equipment that is the most complicated thing possibly in the entire universe. And a robot, for example, is not nearly as complicated as an individual brain. So really,
Yes.
like, I think people are like, well, we're better than robots because we are more complicated. Like, we have these thoughts that are different. Like, just the fact that I'm fucking self-conscious right now, that I'm like aware that I
Yep.
am not aware, that didn't make
Yeah.
sense.
No, but I
Um,
know what you mean.
no, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. Like, see, like discussions like this, I feel like you're right. People our peers, our particular peers, people in our grade. I feel like the majority of people are so focused on just their daily life of just living the human existence, but like part of it is like stretching the bounds of really what you want to like who you how you define yourself really.
Mhm.
Like like I prefer discussions like these over any sort of religion because I feel like things like this teach me more about myself as a person, what my
Yeah.
purpose is, than any religion will ever tell me. And like
Honestly, I just think religion is structured in a way that's not effective, right? I think religion has the basis of what we're talking about. Like they have the thinking, the higher level thinking that we do about this kind of thing, and obviously, like, at least in the religion that I was brought up in, we're taught to ask questions and to be confused about this and to actually like bring up topics and stuff like that. But I think just the way it's structured and the way that people perceive it, but also the way that it's given to people is like just a bad system.
and I think it's the fact that you are giving it to somebody which takes away the whole
Yeah, that kind of
mystery
does.
of the thing because
I
me and you
totally agree.
are riffing off of each other right now.
Yeah.
But if instead it was a setting where I sat down and was telling you what I believe, that's religion right there. You know?
Like literally, I literally just thought of this the other day because I was like kind of just thinking in my head. Experience is way more effective to make you like learn something than someone just telling you, right? Like
Absolutely.
I want to figure this out for myself. I want to sit and think, hey, what if we are just machines that take all this input and spit out something? Or hey, what if we're actually like a spiritual being that's eventually going to be launched into this astral like phenomenon of crazy where once we die we're just going to go to this crazy place. Like I want to sit and think about it and be like, hey, what do I think is true? What can I do to broaden my perspective about this and this and this? And it's just like it's way better than just going to Sunday mass and sitting and thinking, hey, this guy's just telling me what to do. This is
Yeah.
boring.
And yeah, in terms of like I don't think you should focus. Okay, so for example, in my experience has been with the Catholic faith because that was what I was brought up in or attempted to at least. And daily, like weekly mass, is about studying a particular section of history in which Jesus Christ was essentially alive. And
Okay.
I feel like focusing on like that that history, that piece of human existence is not the best way to spend your time. Like you should be focusing on who you are as a human rather than what some guy did 2000 years ago.
And that's an argument that people made forever is just like is I mean history is obviously important, but is it that important, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
is it something that we need to devote our lives to? And that's I think that the point of well, I don't know about Catholicism because I was raised Lutheran, but I think that's what some different sects of religion do is they talk about the moral story of the past, right? Like what the point of it all is, and I think that's part of the like failure in religion is just the delivery of that, right? Like I
yeah.
think it's just like just what they're because it's such a extremely complicated text, the Bible, and I think it's all up to perception. Like you can perceive this as something and this as something else, and it's so vastly complex that people are going to have different ideas about it. Obviously, that's what literally what life is about. Is everything is so complex, we're going to have different ideas about everything. But my point is I think it's you have to find the sect that is I don't even know that is in agreement with your beliefs, right? Like you have that. I don't know. I feel
You
like
need
there's
to
not even
find
a sect of religion though that does that. Like there's not a sect of religion that goes to broaden their perspective about
there.
it. They just teach.
I think what you're saying maybe that there's not something specific enough to you as a person. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I don't
yeah,
know. It's more like, okay, so my perspective is going to be infinitely not in. I mean, my perspective is different from every single other person on the entire planet. So to kind of throw yourself in this classification of religion is a little bit off, maybe.
yeah. And I think classification, just yeah, that's exactly right. I think that instead of um, this classification of different sects of religion, I think we should just like I don't even know because I feel like there's no way that the Lutheran Church is going over to the Catholic Church and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this? Like, what's going on with this?" That doesn't happen. Like, I feel like that should happen, and that like we should not just be like, "I'm saying this and I'm Lutheran. I'm saying this and I'm Catholic. I'm saying this and I'm Protestant." Like, or I don't know what the hell the sects are, but point being, like you you should like there should be different sects, but they should all communicate and discuss.
Like find
I
common ground or
Yeah,
like
like I don't even.
because I
This
mean
is so
the
complex.
very definition of having different sects of Christianity in particular, and I'm using that because it's what we're most experienced with, would mean like they do have different perspectives, and I feel like those different sects of religion were founded on a common ground, and throughout history they've split off as people disagree with different points of their religion.
Yeah,
So like I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say, but
I
like
just don't agree with religion. Like I just that's just I it's just kind of what it boils down to in my head. And if you're religious, that's fine. But just talking in general to people, I know. But it's like I just don't agree with what they're doing. Like it's just I don't know. It's it's there's no perfect way to do this. There's no perfect way to do this.
right.
And
It's
honestly, I want to bring this up too. Sorry to interrupt. I
no,
keep
it's
interrupting.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Um, so I was listening to a podcast the other day, the same one that we found that no free will thing on. They were talking about how if you don't raise your children religious, they most likely won't seek religion out for themselves. And that was something that like hit me kind of hard because like I was planning if I do have kids to not raise them religious, right? That was the
If
plan.
you it caveat if your potential spouse wife will also agree to that
Yes,
because
yes.
yeah, that's
And I mean, obviously, that would have been worked out and whatever. That's fine. But if we both agreed no religion, that would have been the plan. Um, and or if my spouse said I'm going to take the kids to religion, I would have been like fine, but I'm not going to go, and I'm going to tell the kids why I'm not going, right?
right.
Um, but then I thought like, well, it's so difficult to think about that because I was raised religious, am no longer religious, but I would consider myself spiritual. Like I would consider myself to be seeking the knowledge about whether or not we are really just machines, or if we do have this like spirit, or if we do have this ability to project beyond our body and go to this crazy land afterlife thing. Um, and I think I lost my train of thought. I think if I weren't to raise my kids to be religious in the beginning, I feel like they would not seek that information. And I feel like that would be detrimental to them. And I feel like they would be a little bit more close minded about it and all this other stuff. And it's just like, it's hard.
That's yeah, that is
to make that decision. You know what I
that
mean?
that is an absolutely good point. Because essentially you are denying them the experience of learning about stuff that we're talking about right now.
Hmm.
Like the entire reason that we're able to realize this stuff now is because we were given this set of information and we analyzed it and we said, I don't agree with this and here's why. And like
Yep.
you formulate that reasoning. And that's a good point too. And I think one of the best things that you can do is not necessarily just not raise your kid to be religious, but explain to them. And again, this is just an 18-year-old senior in high school spitballing
Yep.
that you should show them the religions of the world, the different perspectives of the world, and explain to them like these people believe this because of this reason, and that's okay. And
Yep.
I'm being called right now. Okay. Anyway, to continue, like essentially, you should teach them everything in order to not deny them that experience of learning for themselves.
Mhm.
And my dad's calling me
Yeah.
right now.
I don't know.
Do you just want to wrap up the podcast there
Yeah, we
because I
can.
should probably call my dad. I feel like that
That's
would.
totes fine.
Yeah. We've been recording for 45 minutes, so we're close to the normal time length anyway. So, that was a really good episode. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed
that was
that.
interesting. I think
Um,
that it would be cool to kind of do some more non-gaming topics for the podcast in the future. I don't know if we need to necessarily derive or completely go steer away from gaming because gaming is awesome, but
yeah.
I think that'd be really cool to do in the
Yeah.
future. So,
All
all
right.
right.
I really gotta answer this. So, thank you guys for watching as always. Feel free to leave a rating, all that stuff, and bye.